Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and I'm joined today by former Atlanta Falcons, Seattle Seahawks, and UCLA head coach Jim Mora Jr. Coach, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Excited to talk Notre Dame football.
Well, we're gonna talk about a position and a player, coach, that I think that is going to be near and dear to your heart as a defensive coach for much of your career. We're going to talk about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Notre Dame linebacker, 2-year starter, unanimous All-American this past season. And we're going to kind of talk about him, coach, from going back to your roots, your background as a defensive coordinator, as a head coach, getting ready for the draft, and just analyzing really what you would look at from Jeremiah. So let's just begin, coach, with the first things that kind of stand out when you watch this young man play. Just kind of dive into what you see and what stands out to you on film.
Well, I think in today's pass-happy NFL, where teams are spreading the field, a Swiss Army knife like this guy, a guy that can do it all, is so valuable. And I know there are going to be concerns about his weight. And I would share some of those concerns to a certain extent. But when you watch this guy play, the energy he plays with, the intensity he plays with, it's infectious. The strike that he has when he hits a man, like look at that tackle right there. I mean, he rolls his hips. I mean, he goes low. I mean, he takes the ball away. He's as dynamic a defensive player in this draft as there is. There's nothing that he can't do. Now, teams are going to say, okay, is he 215? Is he 216? Can he get to 220? Can he get to 225? And the teams are gonna evaluate on that. But the guy named Bill Walsh that everyone probably knows, and Bill used to tell me, he says, "Hey, don't tell me about what this guy can do, or don't give me his lack of measurables. Tell me what he can do and take our team to the next level if he's on our team. And tell me what he's going to look like 3 weeks into the season, a year into the season, 3 years into his career." And what I think you see here is a superstar in the NFL, in today's NFL. Maybe not 15 years ago, but today's NFL, because he can do it all. He's covering kicks. He's covering kicks. He does it all. He's awesome. He's one of my favorite players in the draft.
So, Coach, what I want to ask is here's kind of where I'm as an outsider, not a coach, and never was an NFL coach. I coach at the lower level of college. There's this talk of in the NFL now, it's like 60+% of the time they're in sub packages. So what I don't understand is why is there this need to pigeonhole him to one position when the NFL now is so much of a sub package situation anyway? Wouldn't a guy like this that can do so many different things, pass rush off the edge, he can blitz, he can cover, he can play the run, as you talked about, his short area power and explosiveness is impressive. Isn't this kind of what you want in a modern day kind of second level player?
See, Brian, I think you're looking at it the correct way. We're at a time right now in the evaluation process, and it's very typical, where everybody's talking about what players can't do. You'll find a lot of NFL scouts that will try to cover their tail a little bit by saying, hey, I like this guy, but he can't do this. The film doesn't lie. Coaches look at the film. And when you look at the film of this young man, you see it when he's playing on the line of scrimmage. Now, he's not going to be a defensive end pass rusher in the NFL, and he's probably not going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker because he doesn't have the girth and the size. But as you said, 60% of the time in a sub package, you can use him in coverage. You can bring him off the slot. You can put him behind the line of scrimmage and bring him on blitz patterns. We just saw a play a couple minutes ago where he avoided the block of the offensive guard, redirected, and made a great square up tackle running back. You see him here on a screen play beating the blocker downfield. You see him here. They're trying to block him with the tight end. He gets off the block and he makes a tackle. That's what you want. You want a guy that can work in space. He's going to be, he's like the dime back. We used to call it, there's a nickel back and then a dime back. And a dime back in the old days was maybe the undersized linebacker, maybe a little bit bigger than the safety, couldn't necessarily play a deep half or a deep middle or cover a true wideout, but he could do all the things kind of in between the numbers where you impact the game. And that's what Jeremiah is. He's a tremendous player. The teams that pass on him are going to regret it. The team that gets him is going to get a great football player.
Coach, I wanted to kind of ask you about this. Obviously, his weight is a concern, and I remember another linebacker that had a similar concern coming out of Miami. That was Jonathan Vilma. Can he play? And he was more a pure linebacker. When you watch a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and you see the weight, what are things that you look for as a coach to kind of tell you, hey, this is a weight this guy can thrive at? Or, this is maybe a guy that we're going to have to add. I mean, do you look for explosiveness? Do you look for strength? Do you look for block destruction? What are the things you kind of look for to say, hey, this is something that we can live with this weight because of this?
Bend, leverage, hand strength, explosiveness through the hips, being able to get on a guy and get off him quick and strike. I would try as a defensive coordinator to keep him out of situations where he had to take on offensive linemen right at the line of scrimmage, like now in the screen game, when an offensive lineman's coming out, try to block him, Jeremiah's got the advantage. You can say, well, this is a 330-pounder going to block him. Well, the guy's not going to block him because he's not going to be able to touch him. So you're not going to see him in the NFL on the line of scrimmage taking on an offensive tackle. You're not going to see that. You may see him behind the ball in nickel defenses or dime defenses that, in a 3-down look where they say, well, he's uncovered over a guard. He has to take on this guard. That's primarily going to be in pass situations. And if they do run the ball, what you're going to see is a guy that he's not going to necessarily take on a guard and strike him and stand him up and come off, but he's going to dip and he's going to rip and he's going to slip and he's going to slip the blocks. And then he has that lateral quickness to get his body back in position to go make the tackle. We saw a couple of examples of that on this great video that you're showing. And like I said, I get concerns about the weight because, if he ends up breaking down through the seasons and he's 205 pounds, I don't know how effective he is there, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's got growth potential. He's a young man. He's a young player. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get more physical, but he has these attributes that you just can't coach. And he's a high character individual. So that he's going to take this profession seriously. That because of his versatility, he's going to be asked to do a lot of things in the NFL. Being asked to do a lot of things means a lot of learning. We're looking at a kid that's smart, that is conscientious, that wants to be a great player, that's willing to put the time in, that has the work ethic, and certainly has the skill set to be, that Swiss Army knife we're talking about.
Now, Coach, let's kind of talk about his coverage ability. We obviously talked about his athleticism. When you project him to being a defensive player in the National Football League, is he someone that is a zone player? Can he play man? And if he can play man, what are the matchups do you think he can thrive at? Is he going to have to be stuck against tight ends backs? Can he cover slots? How do you see that aspect of his game projecting to the next level?
I think the best thing he does in coverage is work inside and underneath. In that slot position in what we call the hook curl area or the curl flat area. I don't think you're going to want to match him up on wideouts. I mean, the wideouts in the NFL, they're a different breed, and I don't know that he would stand up. I think at times he might get caught in that situation because a lot of your zone coverages turn into man as routes develop. But I think he's a guy that'll play leverage well and keep himself in the right position. But you're not going to want to ask him to play man-to-man on wide receivers. My concern with the tight end matchup in man would be that these guys are, they become so big and so athletic. You don't want a 6'1" guy covering a 6'6" guy. No matter how great a player he is, no matter how athletic he is, those guys are pretty darn athletic too, and they're gonna kind of outman him at the ball. They're gonna go up and get it where he can't get it. I think that covering a running back out of the backfield, I think if a running back align out of the backfield, he can cover him. But what I would like to see is him in positions where he has his eyes on the football. When you're playing man defense, your eyes are on your man. When you're playing zone, your eyes are on the football. And he's such an instinctive player when he's moving forward. I want him seeing the football, reacting to the football, attacking the football.
Now, do you see any, as we kind of look to the draft, are there any teams that you see in particular that say, hey, this is a fit for him from a scheme standpoint, I know that D coordinator, I know how well he would use a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Is there anybody that stands out to you as, boy, if he ends up there, because this, Coach, so a success in the NFL is not just about your talent, but do you go somewhere that knows how to use your specific skill set Are any organizations that stand out for you that would be good fits for Jeremiah?
Well, he's not going to get drafted by a team that doesn't have 100% faith that they know how to use him. They have to, the general manager is not going to allow that to happen. They're going to have a plan in place and very exacting as to how they're going to use Jeremiah. You know, I'm very familiar with a couple of defensive coordinators that I've worked with that have worked for me that I think would know how to use him perfectly. One of those guys is Dan Quinn with the Dallas Cowboys, and the other is Jeff Ulbrich, who's now the defensive coordinator of the New York Jets. They would know how to use this guy. They would thrive. He would thrive in their defenses because it would put him in positions to excel. The worst thing you can do is draft a guy without a plan for him, or draft him and then put him in positions where he's doing things that he's not built to do. And I think you're seeing, you know, some very creative defensive coordinators. I think Joe Barry now, who's with the Green Bay Packers, would know how to use a guy like this. I think that, you know, the San Diego Chargers are a team that would know how to use a guy like this. I think the LA Rams.
They certainly like drafting the Chargers certainly like drafting Notre Dame players. They
do. So, you know, he's fun to watch. He's fun to talk about.
Coach, let's wrap up here. There's one other Notre Dame defender that I wanted to get your opinion of, and he's an interesting one because I'm curious to see kind of where he fits, and that's Daelin Hayes. You know, he's been sort of a defensive end at Notre Dame in position listing, but he plays, in my opinion, a lot like you know, a 3-4 outside linebacker. What have you seen on film from Daelin Hayes, and how do you think he best projects to that next level? Where do you see him fitting in the next level? What do you see his strengths as being?
Well, I think his strength is his athleticism. He's got athletic ability. He can work in space, and I think he can do things moving forward. You know, I think he's a little bit raw, but he does have that versatility. And I agree with you. I think he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's got length. He can work out into the flattened coverage. He can come off the edge. If they can get him matched up, if a team can get him matched on a running back in pass protection, then he'll win. And I think he's got tremendous upside. And he's a guy that gets drafted in a position where people are saying, okay, let this guy develop on special teams. We're going to put him in some special packages. And in the next year or two, you know, he's going to become a frontline player for us.
Mm-hmm. Now, and so you say 3-4 outside linebacker. You meant he's 260 plus pounds. Do you see him as a guy that can translate? He's been a very good coverage player in college, in my view. I think he's been that. You mentioned Swiss Army knife. He's kind of that front four version of that. Do you think that skill set projects to be able to do some of those coverage things at the next level?
Well, when we look at the tape that you're showing, you see him doing those things. And so, yes, I do. I think, you know, just right there, dropping out the flat and coverage and intercepting Trevor Lawrence, having, you know, the ability to even catch the ball. Then you see him here coming off the edge and beating a tackle. You know, to me, that's what 3-4 outside linebacker. You know, they're great off the edge. You try to get them matched up on a back, but they can also drop into the flat. Or he goes to a team that puts him at defensive end, plays him on the edge, and is a rush zone type of team that works in some rush zones where on occasion he's dropping into coverage, matching up on a tight end on underneath stuff. And then maybe he develops into just a pure pass rusher. You know, with his length, he could end up being a pure pass rusher, but he offers you so many options. I think it makes him very attractive.
Coach, I want to wrap up talking about Daelin with this question. This is kind of your background as a defensive coach. You mentioned raw, and I would agree with that. This is a young man that played, I think, 8 games of high school football for a number of different reasons. So still developing as a player. How do you evaluate that as a coach? I mean, are those things that when a guy can get to the NFL and learn those things, are guys ready-made? How do you look at that in the draft room as a defensive coach? Do you feel you can take a player that has raw tools and actually still coach them up? I mean, in college, it's a lot easier. You take an 18-year-old freshman, there's a lot you can teach him. Can you do things like that at the National Football League, or do you need guys that are more ready-made from a technical and a instinctive standpoint?
Well, obviously, you'd like to draft guys that are a little bit more ready-made and produce right away. But when you get a diamond in the rough, when you get a guy, you say, if we polish him up and hone up some of these fundamentals, you know, he can be a big time player, he's got great upside, he's got a high ceiling, then you make that pick. You know, I mean, when you look at this at Daelin, he has all of the measurables that you want in a defensive end or an edge player or a 3-4 outside linebacker, the movement skills, all those things. This is where the individual workout becomes very important. And not just the workout, but the interaction that the coach can have with him in the film room as they're, you know, because what you'll do as a coach is in your evaluation process, scouts do it to a certain extent, but coaches do it more, is you'll go in and you'll spend time with this guy watching film. Explain to me what you're doing here. You know, what was your thought process here? What was your assignment? Get up on the board and draw up, you know, the defense that you guys played most of the time and what your responsibilities were. And can you tell me what other people were supposed to do? So you get a feel for kind of his football intelligence, which is different than normal intelligence. I mean, the guy might be the smartest guy in the world, but he just doesn't have football instincts or football intelligence. And then you take him out on the field and you watch him redirect and you see if he can bend, and you're presenting new drills to him, and you're seeing if he can understand them and then translate them right away onto the field. And if he can do those things, you go, God, you know, you get conviction about a guy one way or the other the more time you spend with him. And so I would say there'll be a lot of teams coming in to spend a lot of time with Daelin. And, you know, Notre Dame's always got prospects. So you're never wasting your time when you go to Notre Dame to work out and talk to players.
Speaking of NFL draft prospects at Notre Dame, Coach, we're going to try to get together a couple more times because we have a lot more guys we have to get through with Notre Dame. But this is certainly to me the more intriguing players, and I know the way to your heart, Coach, is to start talking about athletic defensive players. I knew I could get you there. So, Coach Mora, thanks for joining us. That'll be it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on all the places you get your podcast. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. And as always, make sure you check out our work at irishbreakdown.com. Coach Moore, thanks again so much for joining us. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Oh, me too, Brian. Thank you.